Hello, I am back and I'm going to talk today about the history of psychology and why, not so much talk about the history of psychology, but talk about why learning about the history of psychology is important as a psychology student. Um, this was one of the first modules that we did as part of the conversion, the MSc conversion in applied psychology that I'm studying at the moment. To be honest, I didn't think much of it. I just took the topics as they came. I didn't think about whether they were relevant or why they should be relevant or not. But now that I've completed that module, the end of 2021, um, it was a really interesting topic, and it's something that I've looked into, and there's a lot of questions on the internet about why would you study history of psychology when you're doing a psychology degree. I think a few of the things I picked up on, psychology has a relatively short history compared to some of the other sciences that go back hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's probably the only science where theory that was generated, 100 or more years ago can still be relevant and is still questioned and is still studied. It's important to understand where and how the field began, the challenges that were faced, and psychology's connections to the social, cultural, and political landscape that it was evolving in, and how this is all connected. And it's helped to shape the scientific field of psychology that we work in today. So it's it's really important and it's really interesting as well. I certainly found it really fascinating. One of the other things that I discovered in studying the history of psychology, it really helps you develop your critical evaluation skills, which is a really important aspect of studying psychology. It makes you think about some of the ideas and theory and experiments that were undertaken in the early days of psychology that may seem really odd, bizarre, completely ill thought out, or irrelevant, why they might have been important at the time and how they came to be. So it helps you appreciate and be able to critically analyze research that you might be looking at today. We are now carrying out experiments in psychology that in the future people might think are, ridiculous or irrelevant. So it's important to remember that. There's quite a few books on the history of psychology, and there were a couple of recommendations through my study that I'll put links in the bottom of this video to. One of the books that I found particularly helpful was this one, A Brief History of Modern Psychology, and this is Liddy T. Benjamin. That's a Wiley book. Really, it's not a big book, really easy to read. And I read that cover to cover. It was really interesting, and that was one of the core texts in my study. So if you're looking for an introductory book, go for that one. There's others. I think it's important to look at a variety of sources when you're looking at the history, because as with any topics in history, things can be missed out, misconstrued, not deliberately, but people have different viewpoints and elements of history can be omitted. So it's good to read a variety of sources to get a full story. And that would be my recommendation. That's what I did. So any course that's looking at the history will probably look at the pre-scientific phase first, pre-scientific being pre-1850. And in psychology, well, in the world, we have always, as humans, had an interest in the human mind, consciousness. It might not be called that, it might have been referred to the soul or whatever it might be, but that element of us that isn't tangible, isn't a physical part of us. People have always been interested in that. So the early sort of thinkers that maybe linked to psychology are those that maybe looked at phrenology or mesmerism or spiritualism or anything of that sort. So history of psychology does tend to start with that kind of thinkers and develop. We looked at quite a few philosophers from pre-1800, Locke and his tabula rasa, Scottish realism. I can't remember the guy that thought about that, but Scottish realism, British empiricism, these were all pre-scientific psychology thinkers. Traditionally, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I think most people refer to William Wundt as the father of psychology. Certainly, he was the first person that established a university, a psychology lab for psychology, for psychological experimentation. Sorry, I can't get my words out. It must be the sun. So he's probably the most well known as the forefather of psychology as a discipline. But in my history of psychology research and reading and through the study that I did for my assessments, there's quite a lot of thinkers that predate him that were really interesting. So I'm going to do other videos that focus on these people in particular, but one that I want to mention is Alexander Bain, who is a Scottish psychologist who established the first journal called The Mind, which was a psychological journal. He's really interesting character. So it's really worthwhile reading around this topic and making up your own mind, because, you know, he came up with a lot of ideas that predate some others who were subsequently given the credit for different things. And I'm sure there are others in a similar position. So it's definitely worth doing your own research and reading into this topic. It's fascinating. What else do I want to say on this topic? I think from William Wundt and what you'll learn around his scientific laboratories in Germany, that is, you'll see that psychology as a scientific discipline really blew up in Germany and Europe, certainly in the first instance, maybe a little bit slower in the UK, but certainly in Germany and Europe. And that was subsequently exported to the USA. So you'll find a lot of well-known psychologists either studied in Germany with Wilhelm Wundt or others of his ilk, and took their learnings back to the USA or took their learnings to the UK, or however they may have spread themselves. But a lot of the big thinkers studied together, and there's a lot of overlap and similarities there. So it's fascinating. I find it fascinating. And that's really all I want to say about the history of psychology. It's definitely worth looking into. Don't see it on your syllabus and think, oh, that's boring history. It's not relevant. It's really relevant. It really helps you make sense of how thinking has progressed, how different psychological thinkers have developed their ideas and where those ideas originated from. And you can really see how the political landscape or the culture of where they originated influenced their thinking, and were subsequently built upon as the next generation took over. So it's really interesting to see that. And you'll see that theme through all aspects of psychology, from educational psychology, clinical psychology. You'll see how the thinking evolved if you go back and understand the history. And it's not a lot, you know, really, it's only probably 150 years maximum. And it's just interesting. Definitely recommend it. So hope that was helpful. If anyone has any questions, let me know. I'll put some links in the bottom of this video. And thank you.